The first thing I remember is the rain hitting my face so hard it felt like small stones. I was running through the dark streets of East Harbor with a little boy in my arms, and every step felt heavier than the last. My uniform from the diner was soaked, my name tag cold against my chest, and the November wind cut straight through my thin jacket. But none of that mattered. The boy in my arms could barely breathe. His lips had turned blue. His chest rose and fell in sharp, painful gasps. When I first found him outside the pharmacy, curled against a wall, I thought he was lost. Then he tried to speak, but only a weak wheeze came out. He showed me his cracked phone, the emergency ID glowing on the screen. He pointed at the address, and I didn't think twice. I just picked him up and ran. By the time I reached the giant iron gates on Blackwood Hill, my arms were shaking. The mansion looked like something from another world. Tall stone walls shining under the rain, lights glowing behind perfect windows. I had never been close to a place like this. It felt wrong to be standing there with mud on my sneakers and water dripping from my hair. But the boy's breathing was getting worse. I pressed the intercom with a trembling hand. "Please," I said, almost out of breath myself. "I found a boy. He can't breathe. He needs help." The gates opened fast, too fast, like someone had been waiting. I stumbled up the long driveway, clutching the boy tighter, sheltering him with my body. When the front door opened, a tall man stood there, his outline sharp against the warm light behind him. I felt his presence before I even saw his face. Strong, cold, commanding. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the storm like a blade. Before I could answer, his eyes fell on the boy. "Thomas." The way he said the name, fear wrapped in fury, made my chest tighten. He rushed forward and took the boy from my arms with surprising gentleness. His hands looked like they belonged to a man who could crush someone, yet he held the child like he was made of glass. "Asthma attack," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "He needs his inhaler, maybe a nebulizer." The man's eyes lifted to mine, dark and piercing. He looked at me like he was trying to understand everything about me in 1 second. "Inside," he said, not asking, ordering. The entrance hall was bigger than the apartment I grew up in. Marble floors, high ceilings, gold frames, a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire life. I stood there dripping water everywhere, too scared to move, unsure if I even belonged on the same planet as this place. People rushed in. A doctor, a housekeeper, men in suits. Thomas was carried away, and suddenly it was just me and the tall man again. "You found my son." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even gratitude. It was something heavier. "Yes," I whispered. "I was walking home from work. He couldn't breathe." He stepped closer, and I realized how tall he really was. Broad shoulders, tailored shirt, dark hair, eyes sharp enough to cut. He looked like a man who didn't lose arguments, or battles, or anything. "You carried him 3 blocks uphill in a storm," he said, studying my soaked clothes. Most people would have called for help and walked away. "I couldn't leave him," I said quietly. His expression changed. Just a flicker, but enough to show there was something behind all that power. Something human. "Come," he said again, and led me to a smaller room with a fire burning in the corner. "Sit. You're freezing." I did as he said, mostly because my legs were ready to collapse. He handed me a drink in a crystal glass, and the warmth spread through my chest the moment I swallowed. Before I could ask about Thomas, the doctor entered. "He's stabilized," he said. "He will recover with continued treatment." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over me. When I opened them, the tall man was still staring at me. "My name is Alexander Blake," he said. "And you are?" "Lily Carter," I answered. "I work at Mel's Diner. I study nursing too." A strange look crossed his face, like he had already guessed. "You recognized the attack fast. You saved his life." I didn't know what to say. I didn't expect this dangerous man to sound grateful or impressed. Then he said something that made me forget how to breathe. "I want to hire you," he said. Live and nurse for my son. Whatever you need, whatever it costs, I will handle it." I stared at him, shocked. "You want to hire me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. His eyes didn't leave mine, and by morning, I will know the rest. A chill ran up my spine. I didn't know who he really was, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had just crossed into a world I never meant to enter, and there was no turning back now. The first morning I woke up inside Alexander Blake's mansion, I thought I was dreaming. Sunlight poured through tall glass windows, lighting up the room that was now mine. The bed was soft, the walls warm, the air quiet in a way I had never known. I stood there in my borrowed robe, staring at the gardens outside, wondering how a waitress from Westfield Street had ended up living in a place with fountains, marble floors, and guards at the gate. It still didn't feel real. Maybe it wasn't supposed to. 3 days earlier, I had carried his son through a storm. That night, Alexander offered me a job I never expected. Tuition paid, salary, a private room, food, safety, a future. It sounded unreal, impossible. A trap, maybe. But when I looked into Thomas's scared little eyes, I knew I couldn't walk away from him. He needed someone. Someone steady, someone kind, someone who wasn't afraid of his father. And for some strange reason, Alexander Blake wanted that person to be me. A knock pulled me from my thoughts. Mrs. Winters stood in the doorway, her posture stiff, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Blake requests your presence at breakfast," she said, "to establish routine for Thomas." Routine. That word comforted me. For a boy with asthma and trauma, routine meant safety. I followed her through long hallways lined with paintings I didn't dare look at for too long. Everything in the mansion felt heavy, not in weight, but in power. Like every inch of it belonged to a world I didn't understand. Thomas sat at the end of a huge dining table. He looked so small in the giant room, his dark hair still damp from a shower. His pajamas neat and expensive. He poked at his eggs without eating much. "Good morning," I said softly as I sat down. He glanced up at me, eyes familiar like his father's, but without the intensity. His were tired, lonely. "Hi," he whispered. I smiled. Small, gentle. I didn't want to scare him. "Your lungs sound better today." A tiny spark of pride touched his face. Before I could say more, Alexander entered. The room shifted the moment he stepped inside. He wore a dark suit, even though it was barely 8 in the morning. His presence filled the space like a storm that didn't need thunder. "Thomas," he said, tone warm but controlled. "This is Miss Carter. She'll be staying with us to help manage your asthma." The boy didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, studied me carefully. "You're the one who carried me," he finally said. I nodded. "Yes. I wanted to make sure you were safe." "You didn't call an ambulance?" His question made Alexander's shoulders tense. "I thought bringing you home would be faster," I answered honestly. Thomas nodded like that made sense to him in a way I didn't yet understand. Like he already knew his father didn't like outsiders. Or authorities. Through breakfast I watched them both and saw something I had missed before. Distance. Not coldness, but fear wrapped in responsibility. Two people living in the same house but carrying their own storms. Afterward, I followed Thomas upstairs to go over his medication plan. He walked close beside me, as if unsure whether I would stay or vanish like others before me. The security guards stood at every corner, eyes sharp but quiet. Cameras watched from ceilings and walls. I had worked in hospitals and clinics. I knew what serious security looked like. This was more. "Your dad seems very careful about safety," I said gently as we sat in his room, checking his breathing. Thomas didn't look up. "People want to hurt Papa," he said simply. "That's why I'm not supposed to be alone." His voice didn't shake, as if danger was normal to him. "Does that scare you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Sometimes, but I have to be strong. I don't want him to be sad if I get sick again." His words stopped me cold. "What do you mean if you get sick again?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Mom got sick. She died. I think Papa would be alone if I did too." My heart broke right there. I knelt so I could see his eyes. Thomas, asthma is not your fault. And your mother's illness was never something you could control. You don't have to be perfect to keep your dad safe." He looked unsure, but he listened. Later that afternoon, we walked in the gardens for exercise. Thomas seemed lighter, calmer. For a moment, I felt hope. Then Alexander appeared from a side path, his suit jacket folded over one arm, speaking to two men in dark coats. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. Danger clung to him like a shadow. But when he saw Thomas, everything changed. His face softened. The hard lines eased. And that's when I saw the real man. Not the boss. Not the legend people whispered about. But a father, desperate to keep his child safe. "How's your breathing today?" Alexander asked. "Better," I answered for Thomas. "He's improving." Alexander nodded, a flicker of something like relief passing through him. Then he sent Thomas inside and turned to me. "There's been a security concern," he said. "For now, Thomas does not leave the grounds." "Understood?" His eyes locked onto mine, dark and searching. "Yes," I said, "but he's anxious. He feels something is wrong." Alexander's jaw tightened. "My business sometimes creates enemies," he said quietly. "You don't need to worry about that." But I already was. Not for myself, for Thomas. For the man who carried a world of danger in his shadow. I didn't know yet what I had stepped into. But I knew this much. This house held secrets. And one day soon, they would find me too. 3 weeks passed, and the mansion felt different now. Not lighter exactly, but more alive. Thomas smiled more. His steps were quicker. His breathing stronger. And every time I saw that small progress, something warm settled in my chest. I had come here to help a child breathe, but slowly it felt like I was helping more than that. Still, the house itself carried tension like a heartbeat. Security guards stood closer than before. Cameras that were once hidden now angled openly. Doors that used to stay unlocked were sealed tight. Something had changed, and even if no one said a word, we all felt it. Thomas felt it the most. "Why can't I see Papa today?" he asked again and again that morning, his small voice strained with worry. His chest tightened each time he asked, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of getting sick, but fear of losing his father the way he lost his mother. That fear ate at him from the inside. "He's just busy," I said gently. "Let's try your breathing exercises again." But by noon, his breaths grew shallow. By afternoon, his hands shook and his oxygen levels dropped fast. Panic shot through me as I listened to the tight, wheezing air struggling through his lungs. I rushed to the door and called to the guard. "I need Dr. Hayes right now, and Mr. Blake needs to be told." The guard stiffened. "Mr. Blake cannot be disturbed." "This is a medical emergency," I said firmly. "His son can't breathe." "Get the doctor, or I will call an ambulance myself." That word changed everything. Ambulance. Within minutes, Dr. Hayes arrived. He set up a nebulizer and checked Thomas with fast, practiced hands. "Severe constriction," he murmured, "stress-induced." I held Thomas's hand while the medication flowed into his lungs, wishing I could take the fear from his small body. Hours passed with me sitting beside him, counting each breath, steadying him when he woke in panic. By the time midnight hit, I had barely blinked. My hand rested on his chest, feeling the rise and fall. Slow, too slow, but stable. I didn't hear the door open until a shadow fell across us. Alexander stood there. He didn't look like the man I saw at breakfast, or in tailored suits, or walking with that sharp, commanding presence. His jacket was missing, his shirt wrinkled, his tie loose. There was a cut on his jaw. His hair looked like he'd run a hand through it too many times. He looked exhausted, but his eyes, those sharp, dark eyes, went straight to his son. "How is he?" he whispered, stepping closer. "Fragile," I said, "but stable." Quote, Alexander moved to the other side of the bed and sat slowly, his eyes locked on the small boy lying between us. "I was trying to protect him," he said quietly, "by staying away today." I didn't ask what happened. His bruised jaw answered enough. "You can't protect him by disappearing," I said softly. He felt something was wrong. It scared him. Alexander's head lifted, his eyes meeting mine. There was something raw in them. A crack in the armor he never let anyone see. "You're not afraid to speak to me," he said. "I'm not here to fear you," I answered. "I'm here for him." His gaze softened, just a little. "His mother used to say the same thing," he murmured, brushing a hand gently across Thomas's forehead. "That I needed to choose which world I wanted my son to grow up in." I glanced at him, surprised to hear honesty from a man who lived behind walls thicker than stone. Morning came slowly. I must have drifted asleep in my chair, because when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Thomas sitting up in bed. His father was holding his hand, half asleep beside him. "Papa," Thomas whispered. Alexander sat up immediately. "I'm here." He touched Thomas's cheek, relief washing over his face like a tide. "You're not disappointed that I got sick again?" Thomas asked. That question hit Alexander harder than any punch he had taken the night before. Something shattered in his expression. "Never," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Getting sick is not a failure." Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and Alexander pulled him close, holding him carefully but tightly. For the first time I saw a man who wasn't a boss, or a threat, or a legend whispered about in dark corners. I saw a father who had been drowning in fear, same as his son. In the days that followed, something changed in him. Not in the way he walked or spoke to guards or ran his mysterious world, but in the way he was with Thomas. Meals together every day, a walk in the garden, a bedtime story. Simple things that held more healing than medicine. One evening we stood by the window watching Thomas play outside. His breathing was steady. His smile came easier. He even laughed, a sound I had never heard from him until now. "He smiles now," Alexander said quietly beside me. I nodded. Children heal when they feel safe. For a moment, we stood closer than we should have, close enough for me to feel the warmth of his body, close enough to sense the storm inside him slowing for the first time. "And what about you, Lily?" he asked, his voice low. "Do you feel safe here?" I looked up at him, unsure how to answer, unsure why my heart beat faster when he spoke like that. "I came here because your son needed help," I said. "I stayed because you both needed something you didn't have." His eyes darkened, searching mine with a meaning I was not ready to face. And deep down I knew this truth. This house was no longer just a job. It was becoming something else. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't walk away from. The shift in the mansion happened slowly. Then, all at once. What began as small changes, Alexander eating breakfast with Thomas, evening walks in the garden, honest explanations instead of cold silence, became a new rhythm for all of us. A fragile peace settled into the halls, but underneath it, something unspoken grew between Alexander and me. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was the way his eyes softened every time he looked at his son, the way his voice changed when he asked me how my day was, the way I felt my breath catch when his hand brushed mine by accident. Still, I kept reminding myself of one thing. Alexander Blake didn't live in a normal world. And I wasn't supposed to get pulled in. But the truth was, I already had. One cold evening, I sat in the library with Thomas, helping him finish a puzzle while the fire crackled beside us. He was smiling again, a real one. His breathing had been steady for days, his energy stronger than ever. Watching him that night felt like watching a flower open after being trapped in darkness. "You're good at this," I told him as he placed a piece correctly. He shrugged. "Papa says puzzles teach patience." Quote. "Do you think that's true?" I asked. He considered it. "Maybe for some people." Then he looked at me. "But you teach me to breathe. That feels more important." A warmth filled my chest. Caring for him didn't feel like a job anymore. It felt like purpose. The library doors opened, and Alexander stepped in. His dark suit made him look even taller in the dim light. His expression softened when he saw us on the floor, puzzle pieces scattered around. "Time for bed, Thomas," he said gently. "One more piece?" Thomas asked. Alexander glanced at me, waiting for my call. "Just one," I said with a smile. After tucking Thomas in, Alexander walked me to the hallway. His presence alone made my heart beat in a way I didn't want to admit. "You've changed him," Alexander said, his eyes focused on the floor for a rare moment. I didn't realize how much distance I'd created, or how much fear he carried. "He doesn't need perfection," I said softly. "He just needs you." He lifted his gaze to mine, and something raw flickered there, something he didn't show anyone else. "And what do you need, Lily?" he asked quietly. I froze. No one had asked me that in years. Not since before my father died. Not since before life became survival. "I don't know," I whispered. But he did. I saw it in the way his expression shifted, in the way he took a step closer, slowly, giving me time to pull back. I didn't. Before either of us could speak again, the alarms blared. Sharp, loud, violent. My heart jumped into my throat. Guards rushed through the hall in seconds, voices sharp over radios. Alexander instantly shifted into someone else, the man I had only heard whispers about. His jaw hardened, his eyes turned cold and alert. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "What's happening?" I asked. But he didn't answer, not right away. He pressed a button on the wall and a camera feed lit up a hidden screen. A black SUV was at the gate. Not approaching, charging. It hit the outer barrier with full force, metal twisting, guards shouting. My breath caught. "Is Thomas safe?" He met my eyes. "He will be." He didn't say we, he said he, because that was all that mattered. I followed him without thinking, my heart pounding. We reached Thomas's room just as he was climbing out of bed, scared by the noise. "Papa?" he whispered. Alexander pulled him into his arms. "You're safe. Do you understand me? You're safe." The fear on Thomas's face broke me. "What do you need?" I asked Alexander, steadying my voice. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for his son. "Stay with him," he said. "No matter what, don't leave this room." The guards rushed in, the door shut. The sound of guns clicking into place echoed through the hall. Outside the room, chaos exploded. Inside, I held Thomas close as he trembled. His breathing was shallow again, panic taking over. "Look at me, Thomas," I whispered gently. We breathed together, in through the nose, slow. He followed my voice, tears streaming down his cheeks. I held him tight, anchoring him to the steady rhythm of my breaths. Minutes passed like hours. Screams, engines, shouting, then silence. A terrifying silence. The doorknob turned. I tightened my grip on Thomas. The door opened slowly. Alexander stood there. His shirt was torn at the sleeve. A bruise darkened his cheek. There was blood on his knuckles. His chest rose and fell in heavy breaths. But he was alive. And when his eyes found Thomas curled against me, something inside him softened instantly. His entire body seemed to let go of the weight he had been carrying. "It's over," he said softly. Thomas rushed into his arms, burying his face against his father's chest. Alexander held him tight, whispering words I couldn't hear. When he finally looked at me, the emotion in his eyes made my heart stumble. "You protected him," he said. "So did you," I whispered back. He stepped closer, Thomas still in his arms. "You belong here, Lily," he said quietly, "with us." The words wrapped around me like a promise, not a command, not an order, a choice. For the first time since entering this mansion, I felt it, not fear, not confusion. Something deeper, something like home.